In 1962, the average American man weighed 166 pounds, stood 5 feet 8 inches, had a 33-inch waist, and could work a 10-hour shift on a concrete floor without sitting down once. He had never seen the inside of a gym. He had never counted a calorie. He had never heard the phrase, protein shake. He was simply hard, forged by a daily life that demanded physical output from sunrise to dark. Today, the average American man weighs 200 pounds, sits for 10 hours a day, and pays $50 a month to a gym he visits twice. This is the story of what changed and what we lost. On a weekday morning in 1960, a man might leave his front door and set out on foot, whether heading to a factory, a corner store, or the bus stop. The car was there, but it was not the default for every errand. Sidewalks were busy, neighborhoods were built with corner groceries, schools within walking distance, and jobs often reachable without ever turning a key in the ignition. The ordinary day was measured in footsteps, not just miles behind a wheel. The built environment demanded it. Suburbs, still young, had not yet sprawled into the car-centric labyrinths of later decades. In cities and smaller towns, walking was woven into daily routines. A trip to the hardware store meant a brisk walk, not a drive-through pickup. Children walked to school, rain or shine, and adults covered ground with each responsibility, fetching groceries, dropping off dry cleaning, making a payment at the bank. The rhythm of the day was set by the steady sound of shoes on pavement. Data from modern walkability studies reveal what was lost as the car took over. Residents of car-centric neighborhoods today average 2,000 to 3,000 fewer steps per day than those in walkable communities. The gap is not just a number. It is the difference between movement being a necessity and movement becoming an afterthought. By the 2020s, the average American man logs about 4,000 steps a day, less than half the distance his 1960 counterpart would have covered without ever thinking of it as exercise. This was not a matter of discipline or a love of fitness. It was simply how life was organized. The street grid, the corner store, the absence of drive-thrus and delivery apps, all of it conspired to keep people on their feet. Even the smallest tasks required getting up, heading out, and putting in the miles. The physical output was not scheduled. It was built in, unavoidable, and universal. The difference shows up in the numbers. In 1960, the average man stood 5 foot 8 and weighed 166 pounds. Today, he stands an inch taller, but carries nearly 200 pounds on a broader frame. The extra weight is not muscle. It is a byproduct of a world that removed the need to walk, stand, and carry. The car, the elevator, the escalator, each one shaved steps from the day. Each one made it easier to sit and harder to stay lean. The story of American toughness in 1960 begins with this simple fact. Movement was not a choice. It was the price of participation in daily life. The world outside the front door required effort, and the body changed to meet those demands. In every step, every errand, every walk across town, the foundation of physical strength was being laid without a single gym membership or fitness tracker in sight. Steel mills, construction sites, farms, and docks formed the backbone of American life in 1960. Nearly 4 out of every 10 working men earned a living with their hands, their backs, and their stamina. The Bureau of Labor Statistics put the share of men in manual trades, manufacturing, construction, mining, and farming at 38%. These jobs were not a side note. They shaped the physical reality of daily life. Inside a steel mill in Gary, Indiana, the workday began before sunrise. Gary, a retired steelworker, remembers the heat rolling off the blast furnace, the clang of tongs, and the weight of iron handled dozens of times each shift. A typical 12-hour shift meant standing or stooping on concrete, lifting 20 to 70-pound objects up to 200 times in a day. The air shimmered at 300 degrees, and the only break was a half-hour lunch. The energy cost of a single shift reached 3,500 calories, more than a modern marathon runner burns in a race. There were no ergonomic chairs, no air conditioning, and no shortcuts. The job itself was the workout, repeated week after week, year after year. On Midwestern farms, men spent sunrise to sunset moving livestock, stacking hay, and loading feed by hand. The tools were simple: pitchforks, steel plows, and muscle. Even after the first tractors arrived, most chores still demanded hours of lifting, hauling, and walking behind heavy equipment. In summer, the fields baked under 90-degree heat. In winter, chores meant shoveling snow, chopping wood, and carrying water. The energy output for a farmhand could reach 2,800 calories a day, not counting the evening chores at home. Construction crews built America's new highways and suburbs with hand tools and sweat. 9-hour shifts meant carrying bricks, mixing concrete, and moving steel beams, often with nothing but a crowbar and a strong back. Each lift, each swing of the hammer, each climb up scaffolding added to the day's physical toll. The average construction laborer burned more than 3,000 calories per shift, with injury rates far above office work. On the Brooklyn docks, longshoremen hauled crates weighing 45 pounds or more, moving hundreds of loads in a single day. Before container cranes took over in the mid-60s, these men walked miles along the pier, lifting, stacking, and maneuvering cargo by hand. The numbers are stark. A modern office worker might burn 2,000 calories in a day, much of it at rest. The steel worker, the farmer, the builder, the longshoreman each burned 50% more, simply by doing their job. The body adapted to meet the demand, building strength, endurance, and resilience is a matter of routine, not ambition. Paid labor was the engine of strength, and the workplace was the original gym. This was not a golden age of health. Injury rates were high and safety standards lagged behind. But the physical toughness of the era was real, forged by necessity and measured in sweat. The food that fueled this effort was simple and often limited. The next chapter in this story is not just about what men did, but what they ate to keep going. The kitchen table in 1960 was a place of limits. Most meals started with real ingredients: meat, potatoes, bread, a few vegetables. Portions were measured by hand and habit, not by calorie counts or nutrition labels. The average adult man consumed about 2,100 calories a day, according to national dietary surveys from the era. Today, that number climbs past 2,500 for the same age group. And the difference is not just a matter of bigger appetites. The food itself has changed. Grocery stores in the early 60s stocked far fewer processed options. Frozen dinners existed, but they were expensive and reserved for rare occasions. A typical dinner plate was smaller, and so was the serving that landed on it. Restaurant portions, when families could afford to eat out, were modest by modern standards. The average entree in a 1960s diner or steakhouse weighed 30 to 40% less than what is served today. Soda bottles held 10 ounces, not 20. A hamburger fit comfortably in one hand, not two. Calories were harder to come by, and they had to be earned. The food supply itself reflected a world where energy was precious. The USDA tracked per-person food availability at around 2,100 calories in 1960, much of it from basic staples: milk, eggs, bread, and unprocessed cuts of meat. Added sugars and refined grains made up a much smaller share of the diet. A man who spent his day on the move, on foot, at work, or in the yard, needed every bit of that energy. There was little left over to become stored fat. Processed foods and snacks, now a fixture in every pantry, were rare treats. Chips and packaged cookies appeared mostly at parties or holidays. Vending machines offered candy bars, but few men made them a daily habit. The home refrigerator was smaller, the freezer often just a narrow shelf for ice trays, not a stockpile of ready-made meals. Even the act of cooking demanded effort. Peeling potatoes, chopping onions, mixing dough by hand. Every step, from shopping to cleanup, required movement. The contrast with today is stark. The modern food environment surrounds men with abundance. Drive-through meals, family-sized bags, and restaurant plates that can top 1,200 calories in a single sitting. Portion sizes have ballooned, and so has the energy density of what is on offer. More than half of daily calories now come from ultra-processed foods, engineered for shelf life and convenience, rather than nourishment or satiety. The result is a steady surplus, one that accumulates quietly over years. This is not a story of superior willpower or discipline in the past. It is a story of constraints, of a world where food was scarcer, portions were smaller, and eating required effort. The leaner, tougher body of the 1960 American man was built on these daily realities. Calories were not just consumed, they were spent, often as fast as they were taken in. The balance between intake and output was maintained not by choice, but by necessity. The next step in this story unfolds outside the kitchen, where every calorie had to be put to use. Saturday mornings in 1960 did not signal rest. They were a summons to work. The American weekend was stitched together with chores that demanded real effort, not just time. Lawns grew tall and had to be tamed with push mowers, their spinning blades powered by muscle, not gasoline. Fences leaned and needed setting right with a shovel and a post-hole digger. Winter brought snow to be shoveled by hand, and summer meant hauling wheelbarrows of dirt or gravel to patch a driveway. For most men, these were not optional projects. They were expected, routine, and rarely outsourced. A retired Iowa farmer recalls the rhythm of his Saturdays. Up before sunrise, he split firewood for the week, repaired a leaky barn roof, and rotated the tires on the family car. Each task was another form of physical training, though no one called it that. The body became strong because it had to be, and the mind learned to tackle problems with whatever tools were at hand. Across the country, men spent 3 to 5 hours each weekend on chores like these. According to metabolic studies, that routine burned between 300 and 600 calories. A maintenance workout built into the week, not scheduled as a separate event. Home maintenance in 1960 meant more than mowing the lawn. It meant changing the oil in the car, tuning up the engine, fixing a leaky faucet, or patching a section of roof. Hardware stores stocked gaskets, spark plugs, and hand tools because men were expected to know how to use them. Manuals for basic plumbing and electrical repairs sat on garage shelves. If the washing machine rattled, it was taken apart in the basement and put back together before dinner. Calling a professional was a last resort, not the first step. The culture of do-it-yourself repairs was so ingrained that trade schools taught basic skills to nearly every young man, whether he planned to farm, build, or work in an office. The physical demands of these unpaid tasks added up. Metabolic equivalent estimates for common chores, such as shoveling, raking, and carrying loads, show that such activity rivals structured workouts in energy cost. The expectation was clear. every able-bodied man contributed to the upkeep of his home and property, and in doing so maintained his own strength. This was not prideful boasting or nostalgia. It was a simple reflection of the era's norms. The work was often repetitive, sometimes tedious, but it left hands calloused and muscles conditioned. By the end of a typical Saturday, the evidence was everywhere. A neatly trimmed yard, a car running smoothly after a tune-up, a pile of split wood stacked by the door. These visible results were matched by invisible gains in stamina and resilience. Household labor was not an afterthought. It was a core part of life, and it kept men physically capable without a single trip to the gym. The next generation grew up watching these routines, absorbing the message that strength was woven into the fabric of ordinary days. Soon, though, a different pattern would take hold. One where convenience replaced effort, and the physical demands of home faded into memory. The American Time Use Survey records an unyielding number. The average American man now spends close to 11 hours a day sitting. That figure is more than double the best estimates for 1960, when long hours on the job, at home, and in transit meant men spent most of their waking time upright or in motion. Today, the body is at rest for most of the day, whether at a desk, in a car, or on the couch. The rise of sedentary living has quietly become one of the most significant health risks of the modern era, linked to increased rates of obesity, diabetes, and heart disease, regardless of exercise habits or body weight. Yet, the story of American men's health in 1960 carries a strange contradiction. Nearly half of all adult men smoked cigarettes. The CDC estimates that between 45 and 50% of men lit up daily, a habit now recognized as a leading cause of premature death. The air in offices, factories, and even hospitals was thick with tobacco smoke. On paper, this should have spelled disaster for cardiovascular health and endurance. But the physical demands of daily life, constant walking, manual labor, and household chores buffered some of the damage. Men in 1960 carried their bodies through a world that required stamina and resilience, even as they inhaled toxins with every break. This is not a defense of smoking. The high rates of tobacco use led to higher rates of cancer and heart disease, and the cost in lives was immense. But the paradox is clear. Men who smoked heavily still outperformed many of today's non-smokers in measures of daily endurance and muscular resilience, simply because their routines demanded it. The health risks of cigarettes are beyond dispute, but the risks of prolonged sitting, now so common as to be invisible, have quietly become a rival threat. The loss of movement, not just the rise of new vices, has redefined what American bodies can do. As the story turns to childhood, the next generation would inherit both the habits and the hazards of their fathers, along with a world that was about to make sitting even easier and movement even rarer. In 1961, President Kennedy announced a national challenge. American youth would be tested for strength, endurance, and agility. The President's Council on Physical Fitness rolled out push-up contests, rope climbs, and timed runs in schools across the country. Boys lined up in gymnasiums, nervously eyeing the pull-up bar, knowing that a badge or a certificate depended on their ability to move their own body weight. The standards were demanding, including a 3-minute step test, a minimum of 15 push-ups, and a mile run under 8 minutes for older boys. These weren't just numbers on a chart. They reflected an ERA when daily life primed children for physical effort, not just in the gym, but in the world outside. A retired Brooklyn longshoreman, interviewed decades later, put it plainly: you didn't have to prove you were tough. The work proved it for you. You moved crates, you climbed ladders, you carried your weight, or you found another job. That identity, The pride in being physically capable ran deep, not just on the docks, but in classrooms, on playgrounds, and in the expectations set by fathers, teachers, and coaches. Toughness was a shared language, spoken through action. But the world around those boys was already changing. Mechanization swept through American agriculture and industry, shrinking the physical demands of work by more than 80%. Tractors, forklifts, and automated lines replaced the need for muscle. By the end of the 1970s, the proportion of men in manual labor had dropped to a fraction of its former size. The jobs that once built strength as a matter of course began to vanish, replaced by machines that could outlift, outlast, and outpace any human. The result was a quiet transformation. The systems that once ensured toughness, from schoolyard fitness tests to the unspoken codes of working men, became less central to American identity. The baseline of strength, once an unavoidable part of growing up and earning a living, faded as mechanization and convenience remade the nation. What was lost was not just muscle, but a way of life that tied physical capability to everyday existence. Today, the average American man walks 5,000 fewer steps per day than his 1960 counterpart, a gap wider than the health effects of smoking itself. This isn't nostalgia for hardship, but a reckoning with comfort that numbs the body. Ordinary life once made men resilient, and now it demands nothing. The cost isn't just muscle lost, but grit quietly traded away. The question lingers, what else do we give up when effort disappears?